Hey, my name is Richard Kannwischer. I'm honored to be the senior pastor of Peachtree Church in Atlanta. I'm so glad that you're with us today, and I'm so glad to be joined together by Clay Scroggins, a pastor for over 20 years. He's a father, he's an author, he's a great speaker, and he's here to help us to go on our journey where we're talking about Cultivate, how God grows the fruit of the Spirit within us. It is my hope and prayer that God continues to grow something deep within us of the love and the joy and the peace and the patience and all the different characteristics of what it means to be connected to God. Thanks, and we're so glad you're here. All right, Clay Scroggins, it's good to have you with us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for helping us out in this season where we're trying to grow. What on earth is a name like Scroggins mean? Where does that come from?
I assume it's Scottish. I don't know. That's what I'd always heard, Scotch-Irish. I don't know.
Okay. Clay Scroggins. That's a name. That's a guy's name right there.
It is not soft. I've never gotten into the Ancestry.com. So I know that's coming for all of us. You hit an age, and it's like they just send you a subscription offer.
You're holding off as long as you can to try to stay out of it. Right. Tell us just a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Tell us your family, that kind of thing.
Well, thanks for having me on this. First time caller, but long time listener, that's for sure. 45 years old, moved to Atlanta in 1998 to go to Georgia Tech. I grew up in Tuscaloosa. Go Jackets. I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Great family, wonderful parents, older sister, younger sister. I met my wife in seminary in Dallas, Texas.
I picked up my wife in seminary too.
Look at that. Mm-hmm. I jokingly say I was there to study theology and ended up studying her. Hey. But
how does she respond when you say that?
She doesn't. She stopped listening to me speak years ago. So she hasn't heard
It's what you do for a living, but
she's like, I hear enough.
I joke that there are no such things as bad jokes, just bad audiences. My wife doesn't think I'm as funny as I used to be. When we were dating, she thought I was funny.
She loved it.
Yeah.
I was a pastor for 20 years here in Atlanta, up in Alpharetta first, at a church called North Point. They have a number of campuses that I was a campus pastor at. A few of them, my last one was at Buckhead Church. And I resigned there 5 years ago and felt it was such a disorienting experience for me because it was the job I'd always wanted. It was, I think the day I resigned, or the Sunday that I preached my last message, I said, this was my dream job, but it's no longer the right job for me.
Wow.
And that is, I feel like God has been super faithful in all that. We didn't know what we were going to do next. My wife said, can you just take a year where we don't have to move and just figure out if you could just figure out how to make money where you are. And I'm like, you say it so simply. You just wave your hand, figure it out. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it's more complicated. But I started doing a lot of corporate speaking, doing a lot of preaching at a few other churches that I just had some friends at. And that's turned into a full-time deal. 5 years later, I've written a couple books, which helped the speaking, but really, really grateful to get to do it. We've got 5 kids. The oldest is 17, the youngest is 8. And we're really grateful for Atlanta, really grateful for Peachtree Church. Our kids have been 6, 7, 8 benefactors, that's for sure, and have gone to your camps. And really
that's wonderful. Well, it's great to be connected with you. I loved getting to know you. We got to know each other when you were a pastor at Buckhead, and got to play golf together, and a friendship has been kindled. I wanted to dive right into your story because it pertains to today's podcast on patience. And what came to mind for me when I thought of you was you taking that leap of faith of a significant career at kind of a midpoint in your vocational life. What did you learn about patience and what that looks like by jumping off of that cliff?
Well, I resonated so deeply with that chapter in Cultivate because you talk about that waiting experience that all of us have, and how it's not just something God's doing to test us, that there is so much formation that happens. I think that's what I loved reading about in that chapter is because it aligned with my story for sure. It's easy to, it's not easy. Everyone has quit a job. It's one thing to quit a job when you know the next job.
Right.
But it's a very scary experience to quit a job and not know what's next. And just the nature of, when you work at a church, when you preach a good bit, it's more of a public thing. And so I knew I had this sense there's something that I'm not where I'm supposed to be, but I don't know where I'm supposed to be. And so I went ahead and had the conversation, said, hey, I'm going to resign. my bosses were all wonderful, but it was just so scary because I didn't know what was on the other side. In fact, my father, I hesitated to even tell him about it because I knew he just would not be into this. He's character to him is not quitting. You stay, which is a significant aspect of character. But when I told him that I was leaving my job, he calls me a couple days later. He goes, I forgot to tell you one thing. Don't ever quit a job until you know you have your next job. And I was like, too late. I have already done that.
Yeah.
So that was certainly scary. But Psalm 23 was such a powerful passage in that season for me. Just really trusting the Lord, as I love that word that David uses. He said, "The Lord is my shepherd." And when you're preaching all the time, it's one thing to tell everybody else, follow the good shepherd. He's trustworthy.
Yeah.
But it is a whole different deal when you have to do it yourself.
To listen to his voice and to
Yes.
go where he tells you. I in my devotional this morning, I love it when God does
You
this.
still have
And
a devotional?
I still have a devotional. And I actually still believe in God. And even though I'm a seminary grad, in my devotional this morning, we always talk in theology about the already, but the not yet.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you were talking about in your story, that like, hey, I already have this sense, but I don't know what's yet. And that's a huge part of what waiting is the kingdom and the kingdom to come. There is this gap for all of us. But what I had never seen before that this author brought out, which was there's not only the already, but not yet, there's also at the end of the Gospels, Jesus says two things which feel contradictory. He says, go. And he also says, wait, at the same time. And what he means by that is just like, hey, this isn't your home. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. You're going to go. And I need you to start going, but I want you to wait on the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so it's this, we live in the midst of this tension of, we know we're called to do something. We're trying to follow God's voice, whether it's providence, circumstance, whatever it is that's shaping what we have to do, suffering, pain. But what ends up happening in that moment is that it's almost like there's these twin engines. We're going, but we're waiting.
Yes.
And all at the same time.
It feels paradoxical, right? And a paradox is when there are two things that seem like they can't both be true, but somehow they both coexist.
Yeah.
That's a paradox of faith, right? That go, but wait. I was so impacted by your Disney story, your waiting lines.
Talk about vulnerability right out of the gate.
Well, as a dad, the thing I loved about it is I love efficiency. So I love the concept of, we're going to beat the system.
Oh, yeah.
But I just thought that turn you made to say, I am concerned about what this is doing to our daughters or what this is teaching them. How have you experienced that in your adult life, not just
let me just recap the story in
Yeah.
case people haven't read it. That we used to live about 20 minutes from Disney without traffic, and I've been to Disneyland over the almost 9 years we were there, probably like 300 some odd times. They actually had a tracker on the website, and it was a little humbling when I finally found the tracker. I was like, that's a lot. It was our playground, which was Walt's vision for it. It was not like this once in a lifetime vacation. It was meant to be a playground. And so
it was in your backyard.
It was in our backyard. So we went all the time. And because we went all the time, and because I am a type A personality, I'm going to figure Disney out. I'm going to conquer Disney. And, we turn left when other people turn right. We know to start in the back. We knew all these little hacks with the fast passes. Now it's all on the app, but you used to have to go in person and kind of stick in your annual pass or your ticket in order to get it. And we could totally gamify Disney. Like we could, and because we would go all the time, we never waited in line for anything for more than 15 minutes because there was just plenty to do. But everything is formative. And I realized I had created not just an expectation, but a psyche and a way of life that our kids thought that it was an entitlement. I should never have to wait at Disney. And there was this time where we had a family in town and they had a very different mindset because we were hosting them and this was a once in a lifetime vacation for them. And so they didn't care as a 2-hour line. And my kids were behaving badly. I was behaving badly. And I'm like, who created this system? And my wife's just staring at me. She's just like, you did. And it is like, I think with today's technology, we have curated our lives in such a way where we should never have to wait on anything. And I mean, I don't know if you see it as a dad or in your family. I'll toss it back to you, like in the sense of, how do you see like the urgency of the now kind of mindset that we have?
Yeah, I'm sure, somebody's listening to this and they're stuck in Atlanta traffic and they're thinking, I know one thing I don't need right now, and that's one former pastor, one current pastor lecturing me that I need to be more patient, right? I just so related to it because I am the same way. I think the challenge I feel is at what point do you go, you know what? I'm going to stop the striving. I'm going to stop the gripping the steering wheel. I mean, what I do that I know drives people crazy, it drives my wife crazy. That's how I know it drives others crazy is, the changing lanes, get in this lane and then it stops and then you get in this lane. When this is a 30-minute thing. We're going to be here for 30, no matter which lane you pick.
I'm doing all this work and I may be shaving 30 seconds off of my time.
Exactly. So at what point, it's one thing when it's traffic. It's another thing when it's fertility, when it's a conversation you're hoping will land with someone, when it's a kid that you're hoping will come around, when it's a marriage that you feel like, I don't know when he's going to change or when she's going to change, aging parents. I mean, it's another thing when it's real. I mean, the table stakes are significant. That's the part I really wrestled with as I was reading your chapter on patience is, when do I willingly and intentionally say, all right, I'm going to stop gripping the steering wheel so tight. I'm going to not gamify the system.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop changing lanes and I'm going to trust that God is right here. Because the paradox is God doesn't want us just sitting on the couch waiting, right? There is a get up, go do, but then there's also this open-handedness of trust and dependence on him that I think he's trying to grow in all of us.
When I swim upstream from my struggles with patience, it almost always has to do with control. And for me, it's like, I don't want to surrender. I want to be in charge. So like when I say the phrase, I wanted to conquer Disney, like what's the issue behind the issue is the presenting issue is impatience. What's behind that issue is an unwillingness to surrender to God, surrender to life, and to surrender to me being the center of it. It's one thing to desire the right thing in the right way, but even when it's the right thing and in the right way, it may not be on your timing.
That's right. Like kids, a good healthy marriage, parents that land well, or of course God, there's nothing wrong with wanting that. Of course he honors a heart that wants that. But I think you're right that getting underneath it, that's the practice that I think that's the beautiful part of Cultivate, is going, what is that thing in me that has to control the system or that has to figure this thing out? And if doing the work, I mean, whatever work you did to figure out, all right, my issue with Disney is not really about Disney. And it's not, it is about what I'm teaching my kids.
Yeah.
But there's something even deeper. There's another layer underneath that's inside of me of, why do I feel this need to control everything? Why am I constantly telling God, I know how my life should go. It's embarrassing that you don't, and I wish you would get on board.
I'll flip the script on you and just say, I'm the shepherd God. Why don't you
Exactly.
get on board with what
Exactly.
needs to be behind me?
Which is what we do. I mean, that is ultimately what I have come face. I think that experience for me of leaving my pastor job was one of the best things that happened was God going, I just want you to trust me. I want you to follow me. And I want you to learn how to be willing to go with me when you can't see where we're headed. And that is, all of life, parenting for sure, marriage for sure. It's all sanctification.
Yeah.
It's all what God is doing to shape and form me. But all of life ultimately is that Ecclesiastes passage of, it's all just, what is it really for? I really relate to Solomon's, I don't know, it's like his hippie era, he's like, oh, it's all meaningless. I relate so deeply to that because what really matters in this life, we know it's not career, we know it's not money, we know it's not fame, we know it's not reputation. What really matters? Well, what matters are the people that we're around, and what matters is the way God is shaping us. And I think if we would be willing to get underneath that and go, why can't I? What is it about this waiting room that's driving me crazy?
Yeah. My favorite little detail in the Hebrew with Ecclesiastes with that meaningless comment is the Hebrew word for their Hebrew word choices, as you know, are all like very concrete. It's the word for vapor.
Ooh.
So like you can see it and it's there for a moment, but it's gone. And what we're chasing after when we seek a life of control and misplaced ambition and all the kinds of things is you can see it, it's there. It's just, it disappears in a moment. I was talking recently with a guy in the church whose mom is in the death and dying process, and she's in her 90s. She's not well. And he asked me, he goes, I don't know, and she doesn't know why God hasn't brought her home yet. Put your pastor hat back on. What would you tell? Like, seemingly she can't accomplish anything. She can't do anything. She's just waiting on God with no seeming, like she's not raising kids anymore. She's not doing, what would you tell my friend?
Well, I would say if anything I learned after pastoring for 20 something years, it was, I feel way more confident with my prayers for people than I do with my advice to people. So I would be super hesitant to give that person any advice about what situation they're in. And that has applied to so many areas of life, and I'm still not great at it because, I mean, you know, you're 24 years old. Did you had some time in student ministry early on in your?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh! You know, these parents they would come to me, and I thought they were so dumb to ask. You know that little about parenting that you're asking my advice. But the stupidest part is, I was so dumb. I would give them advice. I would say, "Oh, let me tell you what you need to do with your kids." It's ridiculous. So ever since then, it's a little bit like
They must have been really desperate.
Oh, I know. How desperate were they? But it's a little bit. My father-in-law is a physician, and I just have often thought what that forms in you.
Oh yeah.
Whether, and this is one of the only similarities between a pastor and a physician, is you are in a situation where people are often coming to you asking your opinion about things, which can be a really dangerous thing. And so I really tried to master that curiosity that Jesus, the amount of questions he asked, right?
Yeah.
So I would want to say, tell me, can I hear about what are your fears? What are your concerns? I love asking people the question, if you could zoom way out and just for a second, if you could just try to put on what would a loving father, a loving God, what would he want to be doing in a time like this? What do you think? I'll never forget asking someone a similar question saying, hey, what do you think God thinks about you right now in this situation? And this person said, you know that emoji where the hand is on the face? I feel like that's what God thinks of me right now. Just, oh my gosh, again, you know? And I'm like, nah, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think that's what his attitude is toward you right now. So that's probably what I would do. So I'd probably just try to draw out, what do you think, right? And then ultimately, hopefully get to the point of saying, what is God doing in you? And my guess is, the best thing he could do is cause you to experience that vine and branches thing that's all throughout Cultivate, is that you would draw near to him, that you would lean on him, that you would draw your power from him. One of the worst funerals I ever had to do was a teenage kid who died of cancer, and I had known his family forever, and I'm driving with some of their best friends to the funeral, and they knew them so well because their teenage sons both had cancer at the same time. And the car I was in, these parents, their son was living still and was doing well and still is. And I was sitting in the back seat and they were like, how do you feel about doing this funeral? I'm like, awful. What, you know, and I said, tell me, what was your experience like and go with his son with cancer? And the mom said, I almost miss it. And I was like, what? Wow. She was like, I almost missed that season where I was waiting on God to heal him, because she said, I was constantly talking to him. She's like, I'll never forget. She said, I would be in our living room. I would just be vacuuming. I would be like wiping the counters, just doing whatever to try to take my mind off it. And I was just constantly praying. And she said, now he's healthy. And ashamedly, I don't do that. I don't have that same relationship with him that I once did. So that's what I would want to encourage anybody in the waiting room is draw from him, lean on him. Let him grow that patience in you. Yes, but the destination is not, okay, the box is checked, he's grown patience. No, what's the point of it? It's that he's forming something in you. This is what we've learned from Cultivate. He's growing something in you. So draw on him, talk to him. Tell him.
And we're not always going to know, especially, we always think, like, if I put in this amount of effort, I get this amount of reward, kind of thing. And you may be calling on God, you may be waiting, you may be crying out, and you think nothing's happening. And so you may not even be aware of what changes. I love how, I think it's John Oberg who says, who flips around the Jeremiah passage, for surely I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you. And John's like, we throw that on like placards and things like that, but pay attention to what those words say.
Yeah.
That it's, God is saying he knows the plans that he has for us.
Yeah. That's not us talking to God.
He never says, you will know the plans that I have for you.
That's right.
And so whether it's what's next for you or whether it's what's supposed to be happening in you, all of that may be shielded from our eyes. And one day what we see darkly, then we will see face to face. So one day we will know, one day it will be revealed to us what the waiting was for, or who the waiting was for.
Can you tell us about the pit? Can you give that metaphor? Because I thought that was such a great picture. It helped me so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, David, when he writes Psalm 40, I waited and waited and waited on the Lord. He inclined and heard my cry, lifted me up out of the pit. That's the U2 version. And so the gospel according to Bono. But this image that of David being in the grime, in the ground, and he's stuck there and he can't get out. And that biblical image is everywhere. It's Joseph in the pit. It's this image of, I am completely helpless. I am not in charge of my circumstances. I am not in charge of my future. I loved it when I was watching the first season of Parks and Rec, and the whole first season about how there is this pit, and it is an eyesore, and it is a hole, it is a gaping hole, and everything seems to be about, they have people fall into that hole, they have people camping out into that hole, and what do we do with the pits of our lives? What do we do with that gaping hole that is in our life? And we know they're there. We complain about the pits. We lament in the pits. But what I'm hoping is through this month, we pause and think about our thinking with the pit.
Yeah.
Like like, okay, this is a part of our lives. Why is it a part of our lives? Right. What is God doing in us as we wait?
Yeah. And I would also say, hey, Psalm 13, when he's in the pit and he's saying, how long have you turned your back on me? I think that permission that it gives us in the patience, in the waiting room, to say, be as honest as you want with him. I hate this. I feel more free to say this now than I would have when I was working at a church, but I was praying. I had a guy call me in the middle of the night the other night. He was a student that I knew when he was 15 years old. Now he's 30 something years old. And he was having he's struggled on and off of alcoholism, and he's back on right now. And is just in a rough spot. Said, hey, let's just pray. And I'm praying with him, and I cussed in the prayer. That's my first time I'd ever cussed in a prayer. But I was so...
it was so raw.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was so grateful he's alive still. And I just was so feeling what he was in the middle of. And he was at his end. He's just hopeless. And I felt that Psalm 13 energy of going, God, come on. This is absurd.
Yeah.
And so I just, you don't need me to give permissions. David gives plenty of permission to be as honest as you want with God. But I would just encourage you in the waiting, tell him how you feel. Tell him as raw as you feel like you can. I don't know if you're allowed to cuss in prayers or not, so I wouldn't give permission for that. But he does everything but cuss, it feels like.
I'm just glad you didn't say it so we didn't have to put the little E next to the podcast that it's explicit at Peachtree. And so grateful for that. But I also am grateful for the permission that you're given for people to be raw, to be honest, to be vulnerable. And you're right, the biblical question, we walk around and like, why God, why? The biblical question is how long?
Yeah.
That's the repeated refrain of, how long, the man at the pool of Siloam, how long am I going to have to be here and be stuck in my disease? The bleeding woman, how long? And so let's let the Bible reshape our honesty, but let's also let it reshape our questions to feel the permission, because really, I don't need the answer to why. Like that's like, I can delegate that to God and say, like, your management, you get to be why, but I do want to know how long I got to go through the pit. Yeah. Clay, thanks so much for this conversation. Looking forward to having you with us this year. So thanks for being a part of it.
Grateful to be a part of it. Thank you. And don't worry about the traffic so much.
Yeah. Keep driving, people. No. Keep driving. Thank you so much for joining us for our podcast today. A goal is not for us to just learn something about life or about God, but for us to connect. And so we hope that you'll take next steps and that we get to hear from you. Go to peachtreechurch.com to find out more, to connect with us as a church family, and for you to continue to take steps to cultivate in your life with God.